Hello, this is Brian. Today is Saturday, March 26, 2022. I'm in the Cleveland National Forest, the Santa Ana Mountains. I am at Munhall Saddle, also known as Los Pinos Saddle. Main divide cutting through here, then curving off that way towards Santiago Peak and beyond. Fire break and Los Pinos Trail, meeting up towards Los Pinos Peak. And here at an elevation of 4,192 feet comes a spotlight on Shrubs video. So, today's spotlight is on the Hoary Coffeberry. And that is this guy right here. This is Frangula californica, subspecies tomentella. It is a medium to quite large shrub, occasionally known to approach tree size, but very uncommon, and it is a member of the Buckthorn Family, the Rhamnaceae. This plant used to be known as Rhamnaceae tomentella, Rhamnaceae californica, subspecies tomentella, and now it's Frangula californica, subspecies tomentella. So this is one of at least 3 subspecies of coffeeberry that are found here in Southern California. This one tends to be more of a middle and higher elevation plant. Like I said, we are a little above 4,000 feet, almost at 4,200. So this would be a place to start seeing this plant, maybe a little bit lower down. But what we have here is the subspecies with the most fuzziness underneath the leaves. And usually I mention whether it's evergreen or deciduous early on in the video, but this one gets complicated, so bear with me. I'll go into that a little bit more in detail fairly soon. So, Frangula californica subspecies tomentella is known for having relatively dull grayish-green leaves on the upper side with a very slight fuzziness. They got some very faint trichomes on them, or little hairs on the upper side of them. And they're kind of dull. They're not really shiny. And they're not shiny like Frangula californica subspecies californica, which tends to be shinier and more glabrous. I don't know if they're completely hairless, but Frangula californica subspecies californica tends to have a deeper green, shinier color. That's basically due to a lack of lots of hairiness on them. And then see, so they kind of have this grayish-greenish color, and the underside is lightly fuzzy, and that's where the name tomentella comes from, for tomentos, or fuzzy or hairy. So we have here, this is a fairly, small to medium-sized specimen here, and they can get quite a bit larger. They could probably get up to 15, maybe 20 feet tall, and they're typified by having some lightly striated, relatively smoothish, maybe some slight shallow furrowing, gray bark, maybe a little bit more, little rougher texture, but it's mostly smooth, maybe just very lightly bumpy. And then the twigs turn reddish as you get closer to where the end of the branches are. So the twigs are kind of reddish, and the twigs themselves are covered in a very fine, very fine tomentum, or fuzziness. And then the terminal leaf buds look like unfurled leaves. If you look kind of carefully, that's what I've noticed about our Frangula californicas, is that their terminal buds are kind of like unfurled leaves that aren't fully developed. So what we have here is during the spring months, probably a little bit later than now, they're going to start budding and getting, obviously, new leaves and little greenish, I believe, 4-petal flowers. Right now, I guess a little bit early for them. I'm trying to see if I see anything that could be a flower, but I'm not seeing any flowers on these yet. So unfortunately, I can't show you that right now. But they're not really extremely noticeable, and not extremely, in my opinion and in my experience, helpful in identifying this plant and telling it apart from other species, other subspecies of Frangula californica, or from anything else due to the inconspicuous nature. But they are kind of greenish, and I believe four-petaled. And then later on, unfortunately there's no example right now, they will turn into these red, they start off green, these small coffee bean sized drupes with a hard seed, with a seed pit inside of it, so it's basically a drupe. And then they'll ripen to a purplish blackish color. So once they're completely ripe, they usually kind of turn a blackish color. They're maybe about that round, and they're very rounded, globe shaped, and they usually ripen towards early to mid fall. So usually October is a good month. I actually have a few of these growing at home, and I had one that was getting really lush and starting to get very large, almost 1.5 feet tall, and that one it died back, and I had to trim it and try to revive it, and it's barely hanging on. But I still have a couple of other seedlings in another pot that are looking very nice. So they're not extremely hard to grow. If you're trying to germinate them, their seeds, what you do is, what I did is I take the flesh off and I put the seeds in water and soak them for a couple days, and then what'll happen is you'll keep them soaking for a couple days, and then you'll get them into a moist baggie. That's what I did. Put them in a moist baggie. Usually I'll put some somewhat damp paper towel, not extremely wet, you don't want to cause any rot, but damp paper towel or damp soil. Put the seeds in the wrap and put them inside the bag and put them in your refrigerator and check on them. Give it at least a month or so, but check on them periodically to make sure no white roots are starting to sprout out. Once white roots are starting to sprout out, get them in soil immediately, and then they should start coming up pretty rapidly. So they're not extremely difficult to germinate. They do not require fire to germinate, not like a lot of our chaparral shrubs, especially here in the Santa Ana Mountains and other brush-clad mountain ranges here in Southern California. I'm going to give you the full range details of this plant, but I know it's quite common here in Southern California, especially. I've seen it a lot here in the Santa Anas. I've seen it in the San Bernardino, San Gabriel's. I've seen it a lot at Palomar Mountain near Fry Creek Campground. There are some growing right near the entrance to the campground, and a lot of the peninsular ranges and some of the transverse ranges here in Southern California. I've seen it above 6,000 feet near Heaps Peak, and then that's going to lead me into the next bit, the deciduousness or evergreenness of this plant. See, it's late March, and it still has a lot of its old leaves from last year. So for a nice chunk of where this plant grows, it could be likely considered to be at least semi-evergreen. But it gets a lot more complicated than that. Now, whereas this plant could be semi-evergreen, and sometimes, some cases, almost fully evergreen towards the lowest elevations, this one's probably about 75 to 80% evergreen. It does get complicated when you go in higher elevation areas. I've seen it, like I said, I've seen it at over 6,000 feet in the San Bernardino Mountains, and I've seen them in early or mid-April before they leaf out, because they leaf out a lot later. The new buds open much later at higher elevations, and most of them were about 80% leafless, and several of them were actually completely leafless or almost completely leafless. So they can be at least semi-deciduous and sometimes nearly fully winter deciduous. So in places with colder winters, more likely to see significant to almost complete leaf drop in fall and early winter. Fall color I don't think would be really too much of a factor. They probably dull off to a yellow like this. But In some places, they can be just about fully winter deciduous, if not fully winter deciduous. So once again, the Hoary Coffeberry, Frangula californica, subspecies tomentella. Again, some slight grayishness on the top of the leaves, some very light fuzziness. The bottom of the leaf, much more conspicuously fuzzy with some light whitish fuzz. And like the other coffee berries, small greenish inconspicuous flowers. And then green drupes change from green to red to basically blackish. And one funny note about coffeeberry is the settlers used to use coffeeberry drupes to enhance their coffee, or if coffee was in short supply, they were using the coffeeberry drupes to tack onto the supply to make sure they have enough. However, it acts more as a laxative. It stimulates the bowels, so the practice didn't last very long unless you're trying to play a prank on somebody. So I would not really suggest consuming coffeeberry products. Or else you might have nature's call come up on you pretty quickly. So I wouldn't do it. Would I get the drupes and try to grow the plant from the seed? Yes, because it's a fun plant to grow. Makes a beautiful garden plant. I highly recommend growing it if you can get your hands on the seeds. And then once again, kind of tomentose, kind of whitish fuzzy underneath. A little bit of fuzziness adding to a more grayer aspect. And the fuzziness aspect also helps retard leaf loss and keep the leaves a little bit cooler in these full sun conditions. And then one other thing I want to mention about the leaves is a lot of these leaves have some slight teeth, very small, fine teeth along the edge. It's not always the case, but sometimes you'll see a lot of times you'll see little fuzzy teeth around the edge of the leaves. So you've seen my video on it here in the chaparral. But it doesn't just grow in chaparral. It also grows in disturbed areas and in the understory of oak woodland and conifer forest too. So this can be an understory shrub in more mesic habitats, but also found here in the open chaparral. So when you're out and about, you see a coffeeberry with some light fuzziness above the leaves, some light fuzziness, very light fuzziness, and very conspicuously fuzzy underneath, you're looking at the hoary subspecies of California coffeeberry, Frangula californica, subspecies tomentella. So that will wrap up my spotlight on shrubs from here in Cleveland National Forest, the Santa Ana Mountain Range, Orange County. And thanks for watching. Hope you found this helpful in separating one of at least 3 subspecies of California coffeeberry here in beautiful Southern California. Hoary Coffeberry. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on another episode of Spotlight.